to the Style My Mind podcast. On this show, we decipher the secrets, tips, and guidance of fashion and psychology with the world's most inspiring people. Our mission is to unlock the power to become the best version of yourself by turning their wisdom and knowledge into practical advice. Join us today as we explore the dynamic intersection of fashion, personal well-being, and inclusivity with our very special guest, Isabel Galvagni. In this episode, we dive deep into how fashion can be a powerful tool to promoting diversity and inclusion at the workplace, enhancing mental well-being, and achieving work-life integration. Isabelle is an HR expert with more than 15 years of international experience in the field of diversity and inclusion, organizational development and culture, talent development, international mobility, and general HR management. Her experience includes, but is not limited to, diversity, inclusion, work-life meta management, new work, mental well-being, stress competence, burnout prevention, and so much more. I am so thrilled to have you on today. Welcome, Isabelle.
Thank you, Jennifer. Thank you for having me. Very glad to be here today.
I am very glad too, because I'm certain we will going to get a lot of advice from you and your experience. Isabelle, can you tell us a bit about your background and where your passion for driving positive change across the organization and our society comes from?
Sure. I think you've already mentioned a lot of topics I've been diving into throughout my career. I've worked for two of the big four consulting firms for over 14 years total. And for the last 3 years, I've been with BNP Paribas, which is a European bank with worldwide reach. Where does my passion for D&I and well-being come from? I think I really have a deeply rooted sense of justice, and I don't see why people should be discriminated or have less or worse chances to achieve their full potential for, random reasons, what it seems to me like. And on the other hand, if we're talking about well-being, I've always wanted to understand why and how people react differently to more or less the same set of circumstances, and how that translates also into coping. And in my job, I have the chance to look into both topics and also to build bridges to make science and theoretical concepts relevant and tangible for everyday life. And that's something that really drives me.
That's really fantastic, and especially in the world, what's going on at the moment, it has not felt that diverted in a very, very long time. So you picking up and being so passionate about diversity and inclusion and actually driving positive change within your organization is just such a fantastic thing to do. You know, I'm a fashion psychologist, and we're looking into the intersection of fashion and all of these topics. So how do you, with your expertise, see fashion playing a role in promoting diversity and inclusion at our workplace?
Yeah, it does play quite a role, I guess. And to be honest, it's not always a supportive role in my experience. You know, there's two sides to diversity and inclusion, obviously. So there's diversity, which is really focusing on an individual with their unique traits. And then there's inclusion, which is really looking onto how all those individuals come together in a group or in a community and ideally create a sense of belonging where everybody can bring themselves and they create something that's better than the sum of the individuals. So that's obviously the goal and the idea behind diversity and inclusion. And if we're looking at fashion in this regard, there are people who can make free choices about fashion and the outfits and accessories they wear. But there are also people who don't have those choices. For example, people who come from low income backgrounds. Maybe they wear primarily hand-me-downs and don't have the chance to buy clothes that reflect the current style, but are from like 4 seasons ago. And if you want to apply into maybe a fashion company or a professional setting where many people wear expensive dresses, that can really be a barrier. But on the other hand, I think there is also a lot of chances with regards to fashion in the workplace. I've already talked about creating a community and a sense of belonging. And I know that uniforms often are frowned upon, but they actually can be a tool to achieve this, right? Because at one glance, you can see who is part of your group, who you can most likely depend upon, who you can ask for help, and who will be there to support you if things get a little busy or chaotic once in a while. So I think that's something that's really great. And on the other hand, I think if you have the chance to dress individually in the workplace, so not in a uniform environment, it's still something that allows you to bring yourself and your own identity to work. And I think that's also really great. So you don't, if you're going to work, you don't just stop being yourself. You bring your whole self to work. Work is not just a professional setting. It's always a social setting too. And so all spheres really come together.
Yeah, it's really, really tough to find the right balance there. And it then also on top of it varies from company to company and from sector and industry to industry. So yeah, I get it. I mean, I've worked in fashion businesses, and they even oftentimes people think like, oh yeah, in fashion you can wear super creative things. Yes, you can, but not in every business. A lot of them have dress codes or kind of unspoken uniform policies where you have to wear all black. So I had to wear, in one company, I had to wear all black with a black turtleneck, hair always sleek back and being like perfectly makeup done. And then the other ones, we had, I don't necessarily color my hair, but we had people who had like bright colored hair and piercings and tattoos. Everything that would be in more corporate, more traditional industries and settings would be frowned upon. So it's so tough. And especially if we look at personal expression through clothing and your outfit and how you style yourself, this has such a massive factor, mental well-being, and how you can feel more balanced and more you, and feeling like you're having to step into a different person that you are not can actually be quite detrimental for your mental health. Uniform policies have been coming up quite a lot lately in my conversations. Considering that you are working in the department that you're working in, what would you say are some practical strategies organizations can maybe implement to ensure that fashion policies promote more inclusivity, but also are not too open so that it would not lose this social included perspective?
Yeah, it's as you said before, it's not always easy to find a balance, also not from an organization's perspective, I think. But first of all, I think you should always rethink if you need a fashion policy at all. Is that something that's really relevant for you and your organization? Or is it just something that's become kind of a tradition? Is it really something that brings something to the organization and to the work atmosphere? And if so, that's totally fine. Go for the fashion policy. But I think it's really worthwhile to question things like that once in a while. And for example, we've dropped our fashion policy. So we're in financial services and banking. So you most likely would expect everybody coming to work in suits or nice business dresses. But that's really not the case anymore. People come to work in a more casual way if they feel like it. I think what is important in fashion policies is to make people aware that they always represent a firm and their employer, and they should keep that in mind. But why not give them a little freedom in finding their own balance in their style? What I think will be more popular going forward, or I hope will be more popular going forward, is stepping back from those strict policies, as you described just before, and maybe move more towards something like a dress for the occasion mindset. Because I don't think people understand these days why they should sit in a full business attire if they don't have any contact with people from outside the organization all day. If they just sit there, work on their to-do list, but don't have any personal contact. What's the point? That's the question that people will ask. On the other hand, as I said before, representation is a thing. You should always bear in mind also what people could read into your style, so to speak, because that's how human brains are wired. We do make assumptions and connections based on what we see. If you have a big client event with hundreds of people, I think it's also perfectly fine to dress more formal and be conscious about it and use it also like that. But why not enjoy a little more relaxed style if it's just an office day?
Yeah, that's a very good point, to also look at the departments and if you are client facing or not, or even stakeholder facing, depending on which hierarchies you're like having to look up to. Like, as an example, if I would have a meeting with my COO, I want to make sure that I look a certain way. But if I necessarily meet with a peer in the cafeteria, it doesn't really necessarily matter that I wear like a suit or a good dress or whatever. That's a very fair point.
Yeah.
But for that would probably need some training, right?
I don't know if it needs training really, maybe more like rough guidelines. So I totally understand people coming new to an organization or maybe being rather junior and doing the first years in their profession. They maybe don't feel as secure to decide what's appropriate when. And in that cases, I think it's worthwhile to really give a rough guidance, but I'm not sure if it really requires full trainings. I mean, I remember years when at a previous employer we had new joiner events, and we gave this whole speech about how to behave yourself, what to wear, how long skirts should be, and yeah, I'm not sure it should. That's something that you really need to do with everybody. I think most people have a fine understanding of what's okay and what is not. And if there's something who's really moving beyond certain professional rules, I mean, the length of skirts is a thing, you know? And it's fair to address it if that's something that keeps happening. But I don't think you need it. You need to make a general education out of it these days.
That's fair enough. Maybe some guideline, as you spoke to, or maybe even for the onboarding process to be like, hey, these are the rules. Because I realized that, especially with the people that I'm talking to, that when they're coming on, especially juniors who have not necessarily had much experience yet, or they don't know a lot of people yet, and then coming into a new job, it can be quite daunting what to wear. It even starts with the interview process. For me, interviews was always like, okay, I need to wear like at least a nice blouse and a suit or like a good trouser when it was in person. But when it was remotely, then at least that I need to look put together here. And I oftentimes still wore a blazer. But if you then like talk with someone on the other line who is at the beach with like, like a throw over it or something, it kind of seems like you're not really fitting the vibe and it doesn't really fit in. And then that can also have a presumption there. So it's really, really tough to figure out this balance of like personal expression versus professional attire versus company culture, dress codes.
An interview situation from myself from many years ago. It was at a production company, and I was really very well prepared, looked at their website a lot. And all of the pictures and videos there were with people in suits and sharp dresses, sharp skirts. So that's what I decided to go for my interview. And when I arrived, everybody was wearing like jeans and comfy sweaters and stuff. And I really felt out of place. And I felt like they were misleading me, you know? So I think it's also important for companies to have a certain degree of authenticity there in how they present themselves to the public as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And it also makes you as the interviewee then also very insecure, like, oh no, now I'm super overdressed. What do I do now? Right. So yeah, it can be quite tough to navigate. I get that. I want to circle briefly back to the DEI topics, because now we talked a lot about like personal expression and being very openly you and being very authentically you. But that is oftentimes, in my experience, can be quite hindering because you don't necessarily slot into the inclusion aspect. And it can also open up, as you spoke to in the beginning, it can open up barriers that people not necessarily have a certain wardrobe to accommodate that can also go the other way around. Someone who is wearing only expensive stuff, it can actually break the inclusion. What are your tips in that? Do you have any advice or guidance?
Yeah, I'm not sure if there is one answer that works for everyone there. I think if you're new to the organization, it's fair to ask if you don't find any information around it in company material or onboarding material. So I think it's always worthwhile to ask what to expect and what your hiring manager maybe has as a recommendation for you. But I don't think you need to necessarily adjust too much if it doesn't feel right to you. I think you can use clothes and fashion very well to get yourself in a specific mindset. And that is something that you can very well use. But I just think there are people who like to dress up more than others enjoy to do. And I think that's perfectly fine. I think what you need to do is to address if there is just talk about that. Talk in a way that's not becoming of a work environment. So I don't think you necessarily need to change yourself, but you need to address how a team is dealing.
That's a good point. So listeners, take that at least away from it. Open communication and making sure that you talk with your hiring manager or whoever. If you know someone who already works there, talk with them about how they dress and what their way is and how that could apply to you. So yeah, just open communication around things. I think that's a fantastic advice point. And yeah, we have spoken a lot about these topics now, and I want to move into the mental well-being aspect, because that's also something that you are very passionate about, and that's also very, very important, especially in the current world state. So where do you think, from your expertise, is the connection between fashion choices and mental well-being in professional settings?
There are many, to be honest.
Right.
I told my family and a couple of friends that I would be on your podcast and what we were going to talk about. And there were two distinctive reactions that I came about. The first one is that people immediately expect to be judged for what they wear and based on what they wear. And that can be quite stressful, because you're always worrying if the conclusion someone comes to is a good conclusion, or if they think something negative, and that can be really stressful, and that can put a serious damper on your mood, right? The second reaction I encountered was the complete acceptance and expectation to be uncomfortable in what you wear for work. And I totally understand the expectation to be judged, but I was totally puzzled by the complete normalcy to feeling uncomfortable while you work, because work is such a big part of our lives. And why should it be a given to be uncomfortable through all those hours? That's just mind-blowing to me, to be honest.
It's mind-blowing to me. Actually, I have to clarify now. Uncomfortable in the sense of just not representing who you are and like wearing what you like to wear, or uncomfortable in the sense of like the clothes are tweaking, and like a wool skirt can oftentimes, if it doesn't have a proper lining, it can like scratch and be itchy. Is it the latter or is it both? Like, I'm very curious now.
Actually, I think that depends on the individual then, but the reaction was similar. So maybe for different reasons, but people expect to be uncomfortable. And that was really mind-boggling to me. And I think that's so easy to avoid, because we live in a day and age where there's so much variety to pick from. And there's so much to fashion that can influence how comfortable or uncomfortable you feel. I mean, it's not just style, it's cut, it's fit, it's size, it's fabric, it's color and patterns, it's the accessories and everything. So in all this variety, there must be something that fits your work environment and also makes you feel good. And that's, it was really surprising to me too that people don't seem to find that sweet spot. So yeah, I think that's something that we can look at, and maybe some people can to bring to the front of the mind once in a while, because I think that's something that's achievable for most of us.
I agree.
And
I'm still mind blown. This is like terrible. Like, listeners, if you hear this, don't ever feel uncomfortable. Like, what you don't expect to be uncomfortable. Like, from a dressing perspective, you should feel especially the opposite: comfortable, confident, being able to tackle the day. This is what fashion can do. It can support you, it can support your mental well being in a very drastic manner. So, yes, please always, then you should maybe have a conversation with the people at work and see, like, hey, what are your expectations of what I need to wear and how can I fit in there better? Let's come back to the open communication solution. Wow.
I think there's more connections to well-being actually, and fashion. So, for example, there's you just said it. Fashion can inspire confidence. I think it can even empower you. Obviously, I work in diversity and inclusion, so I'm thinking now about people with disabilities or non-binary people who have to deal with fashion sagging in all the wrong places, or being too tight in all the wrong places, or empty shirt sleeves they don't know what to do with, stuff like that. And I think inclusive fashion can go a long way to make these people feel a lot better of themselves and give them more confidence in social settings. So that's also something where fashion can play a distinctive role. And maybe what doesn't come to mind to many people, but if you're someone who is into DIY and maybe you enjoy sewing or making jewelry, why not make your business clothes yourself? DIY has all the right markers that are connected with relaxation ability. So not only wearing your handmade clothes and getting compliments for them, or wearing your handmade jewelry and getting good comments for it can be very uplifting, but the process of making it can also help you re-energize and relax. And I think that's a beautiful thing.
I love that. That's a fantastic way, because then you can also, because you work also so passionately at a project, then, you know, you feel even more proud and it just makes you feel even better, and you can mend things and repair things even, and get things more well-fitting, so you're not getting tweaked or itched by your skirt or whatever. So you don't have to have an expectation of being uncomfortable. That's fantastic. That's great. And the aspect of almost like, yeah, the soothing aspects of making it. That's fair. That's very fair. How can organizations support their employees' mental health well-being through inclusive and thoughtful fashion policies, or maybe having time throughout the day to support, like workshops where they can actually do DIY? DIY, would that be something that would be like helpful?
I think I mean, there are opportunities for that, actually. I think very important is, setting a rough guidance, as we talked about before, because that's the groundwork here, right? That sets a kind of a framework where you can be secure to move within. So I think that's the most important step here. But I think what also could really help is really to apply this restful occasion attitudes, because that can also really lift a financial burden from people. Not everybody has a good financial cushion they can fall back on, and keeping an expensive business wardrobe, and on the other hand, keeping a separate private wardrobe can be quite expensive these days. And if you allow people, for example, to come to work in a more casual way, but keep a business attire on site they can change into when required on short notice. That can really help with financial well-being as well. And that's something that's not to be forgotten these days. I mean, inflation rates have been crazy the last few years, and that's something people need to deal with every day.
Yeah, and especially because we're trying, like, I have a lot of colleagues in fashion psychology who are trying to educate on the sustainability, environmental sustainability aspect of clothing. We don't really want to promote you having to go to ultra fast fashion brands to, like cover the gap there. It's better to find other solutions and incorporate what you already have in your wardrobe, or mend things or change things, or maybe, exchange things. Like have a friend who has the same body size like you. Okay, great. Can we swap blazers? Or I want something like that, or whatever. So there are so many options to look at the aspect of the environmental, but the financial and the social aspect of sustainability is oftentimes forgotten. So I totally agree that this is a good point. So thanks so much for sharing that.
I actually think sustainability is also something where companies can do their part. For example, we have a donation program running where people can donate business clothes they no longer like or no longer fit. And that goes to young people from, again, low-income families. And they then have something good to wear for interviews or for their first internship, maybe. So that's also something that helps on the sustainability end, but also on a very personal, individual level. And that's something that I think is great.
Yeah, that's a fantastic measure to do. That's great. Thanks so much for sharing that. That might be, I hope that other companies incorporate that. It would even be like in this TV series, The Bold Type, they have a fashion closet in the business. It's a fashion series, so it's of course way more extravagant when it comes to the clothing part. It's not very business appropriate necessarily in the real world, but I do like the idea, not only for donating or giving it to people who also really need, but also having maybe a subset of that if there's a lot of donations coming in, for people internally to potentially either swap in or out, you borrow, or there are so many ways that we can incorporate that to relieve the financial burden. So thanks so much for bringing that to the attention of the listeners. So yeah, that's fantastic. I want to touch upon one more thing before we're moving into the third segment, because you kind of touched upon that already, not only for disability aspects, but also from gender biases. It can be so challenging on people's mental health to balance personal expression with professional presence, especially trying to navigating gender biases or gender biased traditional dress codes. It's so tough, especially for people who are more gender fluid, because there's oftentimes suits very stigmatized and being very masculine, and then you have like pencil skirts and blazers to be the alternative, or a dress to be very feminine. Do you have any advice on how individuals can stay true to their personal style and gender identity while adhering to professional standards?
Yeah, I think that's a really tough one. And first of all, I want to say that I really hope it's already a thing of the past for organizations that provide clothes to their people to only give them choice between what was traditionally expected for a certain gender to wear. So that's something I really hope is already a thing of the past. And no matter what your biological gender is, that you can pick from the full variety. So I hope that's something that's already there. If not, that's something worthwhile to change quickly. But, I'm not sure if there's a good advice we can give, because it's so individual. And I'm not sure if I'm I am someone to really decide it for someone else. It's so personal. Yeah, I think mix and match is probably the best guidance I can provide here. Mix and match, try, experiment. What is available? What suits yourself? What you feel good in, and try to find that middle ground for yourself.
That's maybe already the perfect advice. Literally just looking into who you are as an individual and trying to navigate and find your style, find what you want to wear and what you feel comfortable in. That's perfect. Thank you. You have been very passionate about work-life integration.
Mm-hmm.
Can you maybe, for the listeners, just briefly explain and define what work-life integration is? And is there a difference to work-life balance? And yeah, can you just explain that briefly?
I think work-life balance is actually a term that's not very positive anymore these days, because it's been just used so often. And, balance always kind of creates the idea of it being level, of it being like identical proportions of your life. And I don't think that's something that works out for most of us. I think it's more like there are times in your life where work has a higher priority, and then there are times in your life where the private life has more of a priority, and that's totally fair, and that's the reality for most of us, and that's probably what work-life integration means to a certain extent. I think the integration piece also conveys that it's all coming together in one big thing. But that's also not something everyone wants, right? Some people prefer a bit of a separation. And that's totally fair as well. I think that's also something where you need to find your own sweet spot, deal with it in your own way to a certain extent.
Great. What role does fashion play in achieving work-life integration? Is there even a role of fashion within it?
There is, of course, there is. um, I think what comes to mind immediately is like for most people, there's a distinctive differentiation between what they wear for work and what they wear in their private life. And that also serves kind of a psychological purpose, so to speak, because what our brain does is that it connects certain things or places or circumstances to a specific mindset or a specific part of our lives. So for example, I think the best example is maybe the comfy joggers you wear when lounging on the couch. If you put it on, you're immediately in a relaxation mindset, right? Whereas when you put on a pencil skirt or slacks, you feel way more professional or maybe festive. And that's because you've worn those clothes, those piece items so often for this occasion that your mind immediately makes the connection and puts you into the mindset. And that means fashion is ultimately linked to various roles we have in our lives and helps us transition between those roles. So that's definitely something that fashion does for us. And it also, as I said before, puts us in the mindset. For example, during the pandemic, we recommended to keep on dressing for business during your work hours, because it will help you to move into the mindset for work. And many people really reported back that it helps them to be more productive and not get distracted so much. So that is also something where fashion can help transitioning between various life spheres.
Yeah, you already took away the next question that I wanted to ask you, because the pandemic I think showed it's such an anchor event when it comes to work, life of work, how to navigate it, how to integrate it with personal life. And so it is really, really fascinating, because the pandemic comes up all the time when we talk about fashion psychology, because there was this massive point of change also in consumer behavior. So very, very thankful that you've brought that up already. Have you seen specifically, because you're also focused on it in work, have you seen, besides the guideline that people have been given of continuing to wear their normal professional attire, any changes in work-life integration except of remote work and that during the pandemic? And how has the pandemic changed the concept of work-life integration?
Actually, I think changes started before the pandemic already. I think it accelerated it a lot. I remember, I think it was the year before the pandemic hit. We had a meeting, and it was the first time a partner of the firm joined the room and had sneakers on. You know, that was revolutionary at the time. And nowadays, nobody would even notice it, probably. And I think the pandemic accelerated this shift a lot. Also, as I said, we are not so much applying a fashion policy anymore. I think that's also something that has been accelerated by the pandemic, because I think we have seen people in their private setting a lot more. We have seen them in their private attire a lot more. And we've learned to not make this immediate connection between seeing someone in an outfit and immediately come to a conclusion about their competence or their skills. And I think that is something the pandemic helped with. I think we still circle back to it, because that's how our brains are wired. But I think we are a lot more conscious about it. And that's something the pandemic did too, yeah.
Yeah, that's, the pandemic, big changing point. And for that aspect, a very positive change, because people felt more comfortable in actually dismissing discomfort and actually moving with comfort. So that's great. I wore during meetings and stuff, I wore a lot of heels, because for me, like, my shoes are doing a massive impact on, or even like putting a red lipstick on makes me completely ready for the day. If I don't wear it, I almost feel like I'm not completely dressed. So it's really, really fascinating to see how even small things can help you be prepared for the day.
I can totally relate. What lipstick for you is jewelry for me. I feel naked without.
Yeah. So it's universal, and that's a good thing about it. Like, we are very individualistic people, but in the end, we're all the same. So I know time is very valuable, and I've been enjoying this conversation with you so much, and I've been so grateful that I've been able to ask you so many questions. But I want to ask you, what is the key message or advice that you want the listeners to take away from our conversation today?
Like, I think what I want listeners to take away is to really question fashion policies in their organization once in a while. Be conscious about representing their organization, but at the same time, maybe there to challenge existing spoken or unspoken fashion rules, and bring little bits in their style that's really individual to them, and that represents themselves, and to dare to talk about it if you feel that there's something wrong with how your organization deals with fashion, and use fashion to your own advantage. Be conscious about what fashion can do for you.
Thank you so much, Isabel. This is so insightful, and in general, thank you for your time and for sharing your insights and experiences with us today. It's truly invaluable. Now, we do have a closing tradition on this podcast, that every episode we challenge our listeners, which facilitates growth, intentionality, and awareness. Could you please introduce our listeners to your Style My Mind challenge? What action or mindset would you like them to embrace internal reflection at their workplace?
Yes. My challenge for you is to pick 3 distinctive outfits, 3 go-to outfits for 3 different occasions. Firstly, for a very important business occasion. Secondly, for an everyday working day. And thirdly, for a day where you have a long business trip ahead with long hours of traveling. And I want you not only to think about what other people might think about your chosen style, but also specifically about what this outfit can do for you.
Fantastic. That's such a great challenge, and definitely will gain some perspective for the listeners who are doing the challenge. So, listeners, you have heard the challenge for today. Make sure that you share it if you feel comfortable sharing it with the hashtag Style My Mind challenge on all the social media channels. Feel free to also give a little bit of reflection in the info box or description, so we just get to know you better and get to know how you are handling this challenge. Isabel, thank you again. Where can our listeners find you and your work, and as well learn more about what you do?
You can find me personally on LinkedIn. Feel free to connect with me. I'll be happy to have you in my network. And you can also find us on bnpparibas.de.
Fantastic. Thank you again, Isabel, for joining us. And to our listeners, if you enjoyed this episode, please like, subscribe, and share, and do all of those beautiful things. Follow us on all of our social media channels and visit our website for more insightful content. Always keep your head held high, embrace your journey through positive change, and be open to styling your mind. Thank you so much.